Ethan had always loved the mountains. The cold, crisp air, the soft whisper of pine trees in the wind, and the way sunlight scattered over the snow made him feel alive. For years, he had dreamed of living somewhere far away from the noise of the city, somewhere quiet, somewhere untouched. That dream had finally come true. His cabin, a small wooden house tucked between two tall peaks, was now his home. He liked waking up early, watching the sunrise paint the mountains in gold and pink, and listening to birds sing their morning songs. But this morning was different. As he stepped out onto the porch with his steaming mug of coffee, he noticed something strange in the snow below. Footprints. They were small, but not like any animal tracks he had seen before. The shape was unusual, almost human, but not quite. Ethan frowned. "That's strange," he muttered. He put down his mug and knelt near the prints, brushing snow aside. They seemed fresh. Whoever or whatever had made them had been here very recently. He glanced around the trees and the rocks, but saw nothing. Just the mountains, the cabin, and the silence. For the rest of the morning, Ethan went about his routine. He chopped wood, repaired the fence near the garden, and fixed a loose panel on the cabin's roof. Yet, he could not stop thinking about the footprints. There was a strange feeling in the air, almost like a presence watching him. He shook his head. "I'm just imagining things," he said, trying to calm his mind. Later, around noon, he decided to take a walk in the woods. He had always enjoyed exploring, finding new trails and hidden streams. But as he walked, he noticed something odd, a faint shimmer between the trees like sunlight reflecting off glass, but moving on its own. He stopped. "Hello?" he called softly. The shimmer froze. Then, like a shadow melting into the trees, she appeared. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. She was not like anyone he had ever seen. Her skin had a soft glow, almost like moonlight reflected on water. Her hair seemed to float slightly, moving as if caught in a gentle breeze that Ethan could not feel. Her eyes, they were large and bright, filled with curiosity and fear at the same time. The alien woman looked at him for a long moment. Then, almost instinctively, she stepped back and hid behind a tree. Ethan froze, careful not to move too quickly. He raised his hands slowly, showing that he meant no harm. "I won't hurt you," he said softly. "I just want to understand." For a long while, she did not respond. Her eyes peeked out from behind the tree, watching him. Ethan noticed that she was small, almost fragile, yet there was a quiet strength in the way she held herself. He realized she must be terrified. Ethan decided to back away, slowly walking a few steps toward the cabin. "I'll leave you alone," he called. "But if you're hungry or cold, there's food here. Water, too. You don't have to stay in the snow." He returned to the cabin, but he could not stop thinking about her. Who was she? Where had she come from? And why was she here, alone, hiding in the mountains? Over the next few days, Ethan noticed more signs of her presence. Small disturbances in the snow, broken twigs in a pattern that suggested someone, or something, was moving carefully through the woods. Once, he saw a faint glow flicker between the trees at night. He realized that she was watching him as much as he was watching her. He wanted to help, but he knew he had to be patient. She was scared, and rushing toward her could drive her away, or worse. So he decided to leave small gifts near the edge of the woods, some food, a blanket, and a small lantern. He left them in a careful pile, stepping back into the shadows to watch. The next morning, some of the items were gone. The blanket had been dragged slightly into the trees, the food partially eaten. His heart leapt. She had taken the gifts. She had trusted him enough to come closer. Ethan smiled. "Good," he whispered. "We're making progress." Days turned into a week, and slowly the alien woman grew bolder. She stopped hiding as often and started watching him from a short distance. Ethan gave her a name, Lyra. He had no idea if she could understand it, but it felt important to give her something familiar. One afternoon, Ethan tried a different approach. He brought out a notebook and a pencil and sat quietly on the porch, sketching the mountains. Lyra watched him from behind a rock, curious. Slowly, he began to draw shapes she might recognize. The sun, a tree, a river. After hours of patience, she stepped closer, picking up a stick to try drawing herself. Ethan's heart swelled. Communication was beginning, slowly but surely. That night, a snowstorm hit. The wind howled through the mountains, rattling the cabin. Ethan made sure the fire was strong and the cabin secure. He peeked outside and saw Lyra struggling against the wind, shivering. Without hesitation, he grabbed his coat and ran out, calling softly. "Lyra! Come here, it's too cold." At first, she hesitated, but the cold was harsh. With a graceful but shaky movement, she ran toward him. Ethan wrapped the coat around her shoulders and guided her into the cabin. She looked at him with wide eyes, silent gratitude glowing in her gaze. Inside, he made a small bed near the fire with blankets and pillows. Lyra sat quietly, warming herself, still shy but no longer hiding completely. Ethan watched her, feeling a strange mixture of wonder and responsibility. She was not human, yet she seemed almost as vulnerable as any human child. As the snowstorm raged outside, Ethan realized something important. This was only the beginning. Lyra was more than a stranger. She was intelligent, curious, and clearly had a story that needed to be understood. And he, for better or worse, had become part of that story. Before sleep, Ethan spoke softly. "I won't hurt you, Lyra. I promise. Tomorrow we'll try to understand each other better. You don't have to be afraid." Lyra tilted her head slightly, almost like she understood. The soft glow of her skin flickered in the firelight, calming both of them. For the first time, Ethan felt a true connection to another being. The mountains were still silent and cold, but inside his cabin there was warmth and hope. Something incredible had begun, and neither of them knew how far it would go. The night passed slowly, the storm outside a reminder of how isolated they were, yet Ethan felt a sense of purpose he had never known. Lyra had entered his life unexpectedly, and now he could not imagine the mountains or his world without her. As dawn broke, the snowstorm had passed. The world outside was calm, glistening under a pale sun. Ethan stepped outside, and there, among the trees, he saw Lyra watching him from a distance. She was still shy, still cautious, but she did not run. She had taken the first step toward trust. Ethan smiled. "We'll figure this out together," he whispered, knowing that this was only the start of an extraordinary journey. And deep in the woods, Lyra considered him, her glowing eyes full of curiosity and a spark of hope. Perhaps this human, so simple and yet so patient, could be a friend. Perhaps he could help her find her way back home, or something even greater. The mountains were quiet once more, but inside the cabin a bond had begun, fragile but unbreakable. A story had begun, a story of trust, courage, and the strange, wonderful possibilities that come when two very different worlds meet. The morning sun rose slowly over the snow-covered mountains, casting long shadows across the cabin. Ethan was already awake, sitting at the small wooden table with a steaming cup of coffee in his hands. His mind was alive with thoughts of Lyra, the mysterious alien woman who had appeared in his life just a week ago. Her presence had shifted his world completely, turning the quiet routine of the mountains into something extraordinary. He glanced toward the forest. There, among the trees, he saw her again. Lyra was standing behind a cluster of pines, her glowing skin faintly visible in the morning light. She was watching him, her large eyes curious but still cautious. Ethan smiled softly and waved. She froze but did not run. That small hesitation was a victory. Today, Ethan had a plan. He had spent the past few days observing her behavior, learning her habits. He had noticed that she seemed to be drawn to light, the lanterns he had placed near the edge of the forest, the fire in the cabin, even the way sunlight reflected off the snow. Perhaps light made her feel safe, or perhaps it reminded her of something from her own world. Ethan stepped outside slowly, holding a small wooden tray with food. He placed a few pieces of bread and some fresh fruit on it and set it gently on a rock near the edge of the trees. Then he took a step back, giving her space. Lyra watched him silently. She seemed to consider whether it was safe to approach. Then, almost in slow motion, she stepped out from behind the trees. Her movements were delicate, almost floating, and she took the food without a sound. She glanced at Ethan, holding the bread in her hands. Her eyes were wide, full of wonder and a hint of gratitude. "Good," Ethan said softly. "You're welcome. Take what you need." She nodded slightly, as if she understood, then retreated a few steps to eat in private. Ethan watched her carefully. Every gesture, every flicker of her glowing skin told him something: her curiosity, her caution, her intelligence. Over the next few days, Ethan continued this gentle approach. He left small gifts, food, blankets, and even a small, carved wooden bird he had made. Lyra would come to collect them, but never ventured too close. Still, he noticed changes. She started leaving signs of her presence, glowing markings on rocks, a few feathers arranged in patterns, small piles of snow shaped like animals. It was her way of communicating back, showing that she was paying attention. One afternoon, Ethan decided to try something new. He picked up a notebook and began sketching the mountains, the trees, the streams. He drew simple shapes: a sun, a river, a bird. Then he placed the notebook on a rock near the edge of the forest. Lyra watched from behind the trees, her curiosity evident. Slowly, she stepped closer. Ethan kept his distance, letting her observe. She picked up a stick and began to draw on the snow, mimicking some of the shapes he had drawn. It was simple, almost childlike, but it was communication, a bridge between two worlds. Ethan's heart raced. This was the first real connection. She was trying to communicate, to understand him, and he was trying to understand her. That evening, Ethan prepared a warm meal by the fire and left it just inside the cabin door. He then stepped back and watched from the porch. Lyra hesitated at the threshold, glancing at him and then at the food. Her body language was cautious but curious. Slowly, she stepped inside, looking around with wide eyes. Ethan gave her space, sitting quietly in a chair. "It's safe," he said softly. "You don't have to hide here." She stepped closer, and for the first time, she allowed herself to stay in the cabin without immediately retreating. She observed the fire, the furniture, and the small items Ethan had placed around. Everything was ordinary to him, but to her, it was extraordinary. She reached out tentatively to touch the fire, and Ethan instinctively placed his hand near hers, not touching, just close enough to show her it was safe. Over the next few days, Ethan and Lyra developed a routine of cautious trust. Ethan would leave food and gifts, sometimes drawing in the notebook or making small tools she could explore. Lyra would come closer each day, sometimes observing him silently, sometimes interacting with the items he provided. One morning, Ethan found her sitting near the edge of the forest, her eyes glowing softly as she looked at a small crystal he had left. She held it carefully, turning it in her hands, then looked at him as if asking a question. Ethan realized she was curious about the world around her, and perhaps about him. He walked slowly toward her, speaking gently. "That's a crystal. On Earth, it's just a rock, but it reflects light in a beautiful way. Do you like it?" Lyra tilted her head, a gesture that seemed to convey understanding. She held it up to the sunlight, watching the colors dance. Then she placed it gently on a small mound of snow, as if to show respect. Ethan felt a smile spread across his face. He was beginning to understand her behavior, and she was beginning to trust him. Communication was slow, but it was real. Ethan noticed that Lyra had certain abilities that were unusual. She seemed to sense his emotions, sometimes reacting to his mood before he even spoke. Objects around her would move slightly when she was focused, though never in a dangerous way. Ethan realized she was not just intelligent, she was extraordinary. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the mountains, Ethan decided to try speaking more directly. "Lyra," he said softly, "you don't have to hide from me. I want to help you. Can you stay a little longer inside?" Lyra hesitated, then nodded slightly. It was a small victory. But it meant the world to Ethan. He realized that trust was fragile, especially for someone who had clearly been alone and frightened for so long. He had to be patient. Days passed, and the bond between them strengthened. Lyra began mimicking Ethan's actions, pouring water, arranging firewood, even attempting to help him carry small items. She was learning quickly, absorbing the ways of his world, while he was learning the ways of hers. One night, a strange noise echoed through the forest. Both Ethan and Lyra froze. A branch snapped, and the wind carried a faint, unearthly hum. Lyra's body glowed brighter, her eyes scanning the darkness. Ethan held his hand up, signaling her to stay calm. "It's okay," he whispered. "We're safe. Nothing will hurt you here." Lyra's eyes lingered on him for a long moment, then she slowly nodded. Ethan realized that she trusted him to protect her, at least for now. The realization filled him with a sense of responsibility and awe. He had never felt so connected to another being. Over the next week, Ethan began leaving simple puzzles and tools for her, small wooden shapes, objects that could be stacked, and patterns drawn in the snow. Lyra interacted with them eagerly, sometimes getting frustrated, sometimes laughing in a soft, musical tone. Ethan had never heard anything like it. Her laughter was light and joyful, and it made him feel alive in a way he had never known. Then one morning, something extraordinary happened. Ethan left a simple box filled with small crystals, each reflecting light differently. When he returned, the box was open, and the crystals were arranged in a pattern, a kind of map. Ethan stared, astonished. Lyra had created something intentional, something that conveyed meaning. She was not just learning. She was communicating in ways he could barely understand. Ethan knelt beside the map, examining it carefully. "This is amazing," he whispered. "You're trying to tell me something." Lyra watched him silently, her glowing eyes wide. Ethan realized that they were beginning to understand each other in a new way, beyond words or gestures. A true connection was forming, built on trust, patience, and curiosity. By the end of part 2, Ethan felt a sense of wonder he had never known. Lyra was not just a visitor from another world. She was a partner in discovery. Together they were learning, exploring, and bridging the gap between two very different worlds. And deep in his heart, Ethan knew that their journey was only beginning. The mountains remained quiet and still, but inside the cabin a bond had grown, a bond of trust, curiosity, and hope. Ethan smiled at the thought. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he and Lyra would face them together. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long, warm shadows across the mountains. Ethan sat on the porch, sharpening a small knife for gathering firewood. His mind wandered, as it often did, to Lyra. Over the past 2 weeks, their bond had grown stronger. She no longer hid completely, and she had begun to mimic his actions, showing intelligence, curiosity, and even a playful side. But Ethan still knew very little about her world. Lyra appeared from behind the trees, her glow soft and comforting. She watched him quietly, tilting her head in the way that always made him smile. Today, however, she seemed restless. Her movements were quicker, her eyes flickering like a lantern caught in the wind. Ethan sensed something had changed. "Good morning," he said softly. "You're early today." Lyra did not respond with words. She had never used them, but she approached the porch more confidently than usual. Ethan noticed her gaze drifting toward the mountains beyond the cabin, toward a ridge he had never dared to explore. Curious, he set down the knife. "Do you want to show me something?" he asked. She tilted her head and stepped closer. Then, in a gesture Ethan did not fully understand, she placed her hand on her chest, then pointed toward the ridge. Her glowing eyes seemed to hold urgency. Ethan realized she was trying to communicate something important. "All right," he said. "Let's go. I'll follow." They moved carefully through the snow, Ethan noticing how light and graceful Lyra was. She seemed to glide over the ground, barely leaving footprints. When they reached the ridge, she paused, looking out over a small clearing. Ethan's breath caught. There, half buried under snow and debris, was a strange metallic object unlike anything he had seen on Earth. Its surface shimmered faintly, reflecting the light in colors that shifted like oil on water. Lyra's eyes widened as she stepped toward it. She placed her hands on the object and closed her eyes. Ethan watched, unsure what to do. Then, slowly, the object began to hum softly, vibrating under her touch. A panel slid open, revealing a complex array of lights and shapes. Ethan stepped closer, his curiosity overtaking his caution. "Is this yours?" he asked. Lyra turned to him, her expression solemn. She pointed to herself, then to the object, then made a small gesture as if to indicate danger. Ethan realized she was telling him that this was her technology, but that it was fragile, sensitive, and possibly dangerous if mishandled. He nodded slowly, keeping his hands away. "I understand. I won't touch it. Can you show me how it works?" Lyra's eyes flickered with what seemed like gratitude. She placed her hands back on the device and tiny lights began moving across its surface. Symbols and patterns appeared, glowing in the snow. Ethan watched, fascinated. He had seen computers and machines, but nothing like this. It was advanced beyond anything humanity had created, yet somehow elegant, alive almost. Over the next few days, Ethan and Lyra worked together, carefully exploring the device. Ethan learned quickly that it was a communication and navigation tool, likely part of a larger spacecraft. Lyra could manipulate it with her mind, guiding lights and signals across its panels. It was clear she had been stranded here for some time, unable to fully repair it without materials from her ship. One evening, as snow fell lightly around the cabin, Ethan asked quietly, "Lyra, why are you here? How did you come to Earth?" Lyra's glowing eyes softened. She touched the device, then pointed to the sky, drawing a shape of a ship. Then she made a motion that suggested it had fallen, crashing into the mountains. Ethan realized her spacecraft had been damaged, leaving her stranded and alone. "You've been alone all this time?" he asked gently. Lyra nodded. Her small hands trembled slightly as she rested them on the device. Ethan felt a surge of empathy. He had always known she was different, extraordinary even, but he had not understood the depth of her isolation. "I won't let anything hurt you," Ethan said softly. "We'll get it fixed. Together." Lyra's eyes glowed brighter, and she moved closer, staying near him as if to reassure herself. For the first time, she allowed herself to trust fully, and Ethan felt honored. He had never thought of himself as a hero, but in that moment, he realized that humanity's strength was not just in technology or power, it was in compassion, courage, and the ability to form bonds. As they continued working, Ethan discovered that Lyra's abilities were remarkable. She could sense emotions, detect movement in the forest, and even manipulate small objects with her mind. At first, he was cautious, fearing he might unintentionally startle her, but he soon realized that she had control. She could lift stones, move logs, or shift small objects with precision. Ethan began to marvel at the combination of human ingenuity and alien talent. Together, they could achieve things neither could accomplish alone. One day, he tested a simple experiment. He placed several small rocks on the ground, and Lyra, without touching them, arranged them into a pattern. Ethan's eyes widened. She had learned quickly, observing and understanding the logic of his world. "Impressive," he said softly. "You're learning fast." Lyra tilted her head, a gesture he interpreted as pride. He realized that even beings from other worlds could feel accomplishment, joy, and connection. One evening, Ethan decided to explore the area around the crash site further. He wanted to find more pieces of the ship, anything that could help Lyra repair it. Lyra followed, her glowing eyes scanning the forest for danger. As they climbed over rocks and through snowdrifts, Ethan noticed something unusual. A set of tiny metallic fragments, half buried under ice. He picked them up carefully. "These might be part of your ship," he said, showing them to Lyra. She reached out with a trembling hand and touched them. Her eyes glowed brightly, then dimmed slightly, as if in relief. Ethan understood. This was a crucial step. They were on the path to repairing the craft and perhaps to returning her home. That night by the fire, Ethan and Lyra worked together, examining the fragments and discussing, without words, how they might fit into the device. Ethan would draw shapes in the snow, and Lyra would respond with gestures, nods, and glowing patterns. They developed a rhythm, a silent conversation that was both complex and intimate. As the days passed, Ethan realized something incredible. Human patience and creativity complemented Lyra's intelligence and abilities perfectly. Alone, either of them might struggle to repair the ship, but together they could achieve something extraordinary. It was the essence of HFY, the celebration of human courage, ingenuity, and cooperation with the unknown. One evening, Lyra paused during their work and looked at Ethan. Her glowing eyes were soft, almost shy. She placed a small hand on the device, then on her chest, then toward him. Ethan understood. She was expressing gratitude, perhaps even friendship. The connection they shared went beyond words. It was trust, respect, and shared purpose. Then, a sudden thought struck Ethan. "Lyra, if anyone finds you here, it could be dangerous. We need to be careful. Are you hiding from someone?" Lyra's glow intensified. She pointed toward the sky, then made a motion suggesting pursuit, something fast and mechanical. Ethan's stomach tightened. She was not just stranded, she was being hunted. He had always imagined danger in the forest, but now it was real, and it was far beyond anything he had faced before. "We'll protect you," Ethan said firmly. "No one will harm you here." Lyra tilted her head as if to say she trusted him, but Ethan could feel the tension in her movements. The hunt for her was ongoing, and time was running out. He realized that helping Lyra was no longer just about repairing her ship. It was about keeping her safe, using every ounce of human ingenuity and courage. By the end of Part 3, Ethan had learned the truth about Lyra. She was extraordinary, intelligent, and alone in a strange world. But he had also learned something about himself. Humans could rise to meet challenges they never imagined, protecting what they loved, learning from others, and finding strength in unexpected friendships. As the mountains glowed in the last light of sunset, Ethan and Lyra sat by the cabin fire, silent but connected. Their journey was far from over, but they were ready. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, combining human determination with alien brilliance. And in the quiet night, with snow falling softly around the cabin, Ethan realized that the most extraordinary discoveries were not just about technology or power, they were about trust, friendship, and the courage to embrace the unknown. The morning air was sharp and cold in the mountains, carrying the scent of pine and snow. Ethan woke early as usual, but there was a tension in the air he had not felt before. He glanced out of the cabin window and noticed Lyra moving near the edge of the forest. Her glow was brighter than normal, her eyes scanning the trees as if she sensed something Ethan could not. He stepped outside, his boots crunching in the fresh snow. "Lyra," he called softly. "What is it?" She froze, then turned to him and pointed toward the valley below. Ethan squinted. At first, he saw nothing unusual, but then a faint metallic glint caught his eye. Shapes moved slowly between the trees, mechanical, unnatural. Machines, drones, something alien, but not like Lyra. Ethan's heart tightened. "You were right," he whispered. "They've come for you." Lyra's glow pulsed rapidly, her body tensing. Ethan noticed her hands tremble slightly as she reached toward the small device from her ship. She was alert, ready. She knew they were coming, even before Ethan could fully understand. The next few hours were a flurry of preparation. Ethan moved swiftly through the cabin, gathering tools, stacking firewood, and setting small barriers and markers in the snow. Lyra hovered near him, her hands moving over the alien device, sending small pulses of energy into the forest. Ethan realized she was using it to detect movement, to anticipate the approach of the unknown pursuers. "We need a plan," he said firmly. "If they find you, it could be dangerous." Lyra nodded, then moved closer, touching his shoulder briefly. Ethan felt a sense of calm pass between them. Together, they would face whatever was coming. By mid-afternoon, the machines appeared more clearly in the forest. Small drones hovered near the trees, scanning, sending signals that Lyra could sense. Ethan watched as she guided them with subtle movements, bending the light and shadows to make their presence harder to detect. "They're advanced," Ethan murmured, "but we can outsmart them." Lyra's eyes glowed brightly. She lifted her hands slightly, and Ethan noticed how her powers affected the snow and trees around them. Small branches moved, rocks shifted, and light flickered in the forest. She was creating camouflage, altering the environment just enough to confuse the pursuers. Ethan nodded approvingly. "Good, that gives us an advantage." They moved together toward the ridge, the higher ground giving them a better view of the valley. Ethan scanned the forest carefully, noting the machines' patterns. They were organized, systematic, but predictable. With Lyra's help, he realized they could use the terrain to their advantage. "Follow my lead," Ethan whispered. "We'll set traps, use decoys, and make them think we're somewhere we're not." Lyra tilted her head, glowing softly, as if to say she understood. She began assisting, using her abilities to subtly move rocks and snow, creating misleading tracks and paths. Ethan was impressed. Her intelligence and creativity were extraordinary, and together, they were a formidable team. As the afternoon sun lowered, Ethan and Lyra put their plan into action. Ethan placed simple traps, loose rocks, hidden pits, and false trails in the snow, while Lyra used her powers to manipulate light and shadows. The forest became a maze, an elaborate puzzle designed to confuse the pursuers. Hours passed. The drones moved carefully through the forest, scanning, probing, trying to find Lyra. But Ethan and Lyra's combined efforts kept them hidden. When one machine approached too closely, Lyra sent a pulse of energy, causing it to malfunction temporarily. Ethan felt a surge of pride. Humanity's ingenuity, combined with her abilities, was keeping them safe. Night fell, and the forest grew dark and silent, except for the faint hum of distant machines. Ethan and Lyra huddled near the cabin, reviewing their progress. "They'll come again," Ethan said. "Tomorrow we need to be ready for more." Lyra's glow dimmed slightly, but she stayed near him, a silent promise that she trusted him to protect her. Ethan realized that their bond was more than just survival. It was mutual respect, trust, and reliance. They were partners facing an extraordinary challenge together. The next morning, the machines returned in greater numbers. They moved methodically, almost like hunters, covering more ground. Ethan and Lyra stayed calm, using their traps and decoys to mislead them. One drone flew directly toward the cabin, its sensors scanning. Lyra raised her hands, and a shimmer of light deflected the machine's path. It crashed harmlessly into a tree, and Ethan breathed a quiet sigh of relief. "We can do this," he whispered. "We just have to stay clever." As the day wore on, the tension in the forest grew. Ethan noticed something remarkable. Lyra's powers were becoming stronger with practice. She could manipulate objects at a distance more easily, control light and shadows more precisely, and sense the machines before they were fully visible. Ethan realized that the challenge was making her stronger, teaching her to trust her own abilities. By late afternoon, the drones began to retreat, confused and unable to locate Lyra. Ethan and Lyra took the opportunity to move the alien device from the crash site to a safer location, one hidden deep in a rocky alcove. It was a delicate task, but together they managed it. Lyra's glow softened, her breathing easing as she realized the device was safe. Ethan looked at her and smiled. "We did it. You did it." Lyra tilted her head, her expression one of quiet pride. She had learned something important, that even in the face of danger, patience, intelligence, and cooperation could overcome fear. That night, the mountains were calm. Ethan built a fire, and they sat together, the warmth of the flames reflecting in Lyra's glowing skin. They did not speak much. Words were not always necessary, but the connection between them was clear. They had faced a threat and survived, relying on courage, trust, and each other. The following days were a careful balance of preparation and repair. Ethan and Lyra worked together on the alien device, testing its functions, learning how it communicated, and slowly understanding the steps needed to repair her ship. Lyra demonstrated incredible precision, while Ethan contributed his human ingenuity, crafting tools from what the mountains provided, creating simple yet effective mechanisms. During one of their sessions, Ethan noticed that Lyra was studying him as much as he was studying the device. Her eyes glowed with curiosity, and she mimicked some of his actions, placing tools in a particular order and adjusting small components. It struck Ethan that she was learning from him, not just helping herself, but observing human thought and creativity. "You're smart," he said softly, a smile tugging at his lips. "And you learn fast. I've never seen anything like this." Lyra's glow brightened in response. She placed her hand briefly on his arm, a gesture of friendship and trust, and then returned to her work. Ethan felt a warmth he could not describe. The connection between human and alien, stranger and friend, was stronger than any fear or danger around them. But even as they worked, the threat of the pursuers lingered. Ethan could sense it, and he knew that sooner or later, the machines would return in greater numbers. The next encounter would test not only Lyra's abilities, but also his own courage and cleverness. He resolved to be ready. One evening, as snow fell softly around the cabin, Ethan sat by the fire, studying the patterns Lyra had created in the snow with the device. Each pulse of light, each arrangement of symbols seemed deliberate, almost like a message. Ethan realized she was trying to communicate her knowledge, her understanding of her world, and perhaps a way to protect herself. He placed a hand on the snow patterns, careful not to disturb them. "We'll figure this out together," he whispered. "No matter what comes, we'll be ready." Lyra tilted her head and glowed softly. She understood. Together they were learning, adapting, and becoming stronger. By the end of Part 4, the threat had tested their ingenuity, patience, and courage. Ethan had proven that human intelligence and determination could complement alien abilities in extraordinary ways. Lyra had learned to trust, to act with precision, and to face danger with confidence. The mountains were quiet once more, but Ethan knew it was only temporary. The pursuers would return, stronger and more determined. Yet he also knew that together, he and Lyra could face anything. Their bond was no longer fragile, it was a force. And in the quiet night, with snow falling around the cabin and the glow of the alien device illuminating their faces, they prepared for the challenges that lay ahead, ready to face the unknown with courage, trust, and hope. The first light of dawn crept over the mountain peaks, casting a soft glow over the snow. Ethan stirred in his bed, listening to the quiet of the cabin. But the peace of the morning did not calm him entirely. He knew the pursuers were still out there, somewhere in the forest, and their return was only a matter of time. Lyra glided quietly into the cabin, her glow soft and steady. She paused near the window, scanning the forest. Ethan noticed her tense posture. Even though she had grown stronger and more confident over the past weeks, the threat remained real. He walked to her side and placed a reassuring hand on her arm. "We've prepared as much as we can," he said softly. "Now it's time to face them. Together." Lyra turned toward him, her eyes glowing with determination. For the first time, she did not seem fearful. She understood the plan. Together they would confront the pursuers and prove that human ingenuity, combined with her extraordinary abilities, could triumph over even the most advanced forces. They moved silently through the snow toward the ridge overlooking the valley. Ethan had spent hours mapping the terrain, planning traps and decoys. Lyra's powers allowed them to manipulate light, shadows, and small objects, creating illusions that would confuse the pursuers. Ethan felt a surge of confidence. Their preparation had been meticulous, and now it was time to put it into action. From their vantage point, they saw the first machines moving through the forest. Drones and mechanical scouts advanced with precision, scanning the snow for signs of Lyra. Ethan held his breath, and Lyra's glow brightened as she prepared to act. "Stay calm," Ethan whispered. "Follow my lead." As the pursuers entered the maze of snow, rocks, and illusions they had created, confusion took hold. Some machines followed false trails into hidden pits, others became trapped in snowdrifts or tangled in manipulated branches. Lyra's powers added another layer of deception, light bending around the trees, shadows shifting to hide their movements. Ethan and Lyra watched with careful attention. Every misstep by the pursuers was a victory, but they could not afford complacency. The machines were relentless, and one error could be disastrous. Then, a drone broke free of the illusions and moved directly toward the ridge. Ethan tensed, but Lyra acted instantly. She raised her hands, and a pulse of energy emitted from her device. The drone's sensors overloaded, and it crashed harmlessly into the snow. Ethan exhaled, feeling a mix of relief and pride. Together, they were turning the tide. As the sun climbed higher, Ethan and Lyra began to implement the next stage of their plan. Ethan had crafted simple but clever decoys from snow, rocks, and logs, designed to mimic movement and mislead the pursuers. Lyra enhanced them with subtle energy pulses, making them appear almost alive. The forest became a battlefield of wits, where strategy, intelligence, and cooperation determined the outcome. Hours passed. The pursuers were methodical, but their numbers dwindled. Machines malfunctioned, became trapped, or were redirected into dead ends. Ethan realized that human creativity, patience, and careful observation, combined with Lyra's extraordinary abilities, were a formidable force. They were proving that courage and intelligence could overcome even the most advanced threats. Finally, the last of the pursuers appeared. A larger, more advanced machine, its sensors scanning methodically, searching for Lyra. Ethan and Lyra exchanged a glance. This was the final challenge. Together, they would face it. Ethan whispered his plan. "I'll lead it into the cave. You'll be ready to act when it's close." Lyra nodded. Her glow intensified. They moved cautiously, baiting the machine toward a narrow cave entrance they had prepared. Ethan stayed calm, his movements deliberate. The machine followed, unaware of the traps hidden inside. At the right moment, Lyra released a pulse of energy from her device. The machine's systems overloaded, causing it to spin and stumble inside the cave. Ethan had predicted the motion perfectly. The machine became stuck in a rocky crevice, completely immobilized. Ethan let out a quiet laugh, shaking his head in disbelief. "We did it," he said softly. Lyra's glow softened, her posture relaxing. For the first time since she arrived, there was no immediate threat. They had outsmarted the pursuers. They had survived, but their work was not finished. Ethan turned to Lyra, gesturing toward the scattered fragments of her ship. "Now, let's get you home." Together, they carefully retrieved the remaining pieces of the alien device and carried them to the cabin. Over the next several days, they worked tirelessly, combining Lyra's knowledge of her technology with Ethan's ingenuity. Using simple tools and the resources of the mountains, Ethan helped her repair the device, creating connections, replacing damaged parts, and recalibrating its functions. Lyra worked with precision, her glowing hands moving with care and confidence. Ethan marveled at her abilities, realizing that she had adapted to Earth remarkably quickly. Their teamwork was seamless. Human creativity and patience complemented alien intelligence perfectly. By the fourth day, the device was fully operational. Lyra activated it, sending signals into the sky. A soft hum filled the air, and the machine emitted a bright glow. Ethan watched in awe as small lights appeared in the distance, guiding the path to her ship. Lyra turned to Ethan, her glowing eyes shining with gratitude. She placed her hand gently on his shoulder, a silent expression of friendship and trust. Ethan smiled, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. He had helped her survive, helped her repair her technology, and together they had outsmarted a threat far beyond his imagination. The final step was approaching the ship. Ethan and Lyra moved carefully through the snow, carrying the device to the crash site. Lyra activated it fully, and the remaining fragments of the ship began to reassemble, guided by her energy and intelligence. Ethan watched in wonder as alien technology, once broken and lifeless, started to regain form. "You've done it," he whispered. "You're going home." Lyra paused, her glowing eyes meeting his. She tilted her head slightly, almost shyly. Then, in a gesture of deep trust, she reached out, touching his hand briefly. Ethan felt a warmth pass through him, a bond that transcended words, species, and worlds. The ship's engines hummed softly, and the remaining energy flowed through the device. Lyra climbed inside, preparing for departure. Ethan watched as the ship lifted gently into the sky, snow sparkling around it in the morning sunlight. The forest was quiet, the mountains peaceful. And yet the memory of the adventure, the danger, the trust, the teamwork, remained vivid in his mind. Lyra hovered briefly above the ground, her glow bright and steady. Then, with a gentle nod toward Ethan, she ascended fully into the sky. The ship glimmered like a star as it moved higher, heading toward the unknown. Ethan stood in the snow, feeling awe, pride, and hope. He realized something extraordinary. Humanity's strength was not in weapons or power. It was in courage, creativity, and the ability to trust and work together. Lyra's abilities were incredible, but without Ethan's patience, ingenuity, and determination, she might never have succeeded. Together, they had proven that human intelligence combined with curiosity and bravery could triumph against overwhelming odds. As the ship disappeared into the sky, Ethan felt a quiet satisfaction. He had faced fear, uncertainty, and danger, yet he had emerged stronger. He had formed a bond with a being from another world, one that would remain with him forever. The mountains were silent once more. Ethan returned to his cabin, watching the snow glisten in the sunlight. Lyra was gone, but her presence lingered, a reminder of trust, courage, and the incredible things that could happen when two worlds worked together. That evening, Ethan sat by the fire, reflecting on the journey. He had learned that even in the face of the unknown, humanity could rise to meet challenges, solve problems creatively, and form bonds that transcended fear and difference. The mountains were still, but he knew that life, extraordinary, surprising, and full of wonder, awaited beyond every peak and valley. For the first time, Ethan felt truly connected to something greater than himself. He had not only survived, but he had triumphed. He had shown that human courage and ingenuity could shine brightly even when faced with the unknown. And somewhere far above the mountains, Lyra carried that trust, friendship, and hope back to her own world. Ethan smiled, knowing that their journey, though ending here, had changed both of them forever. Humanity had triumphed, not through force, but through patience, intelligence, and the courage to trust and understand. And in that victory, he found a joy deeper than any he had ever known. The mountains were quiet, the snow untouched, and yet the story of courage, trust, and friendship lingered in the air, a silent reminder that even in the vastness of the universe, humanity could shine brightly.